Hey everybody, I'm Matthew Naiman on behalf of RocketStock.com, and today we're taking a look at Abyss. No, Abyss isn't an awesome science fiction film from the 1980s by James Cameron. It's a collection of over 150 high-quality visual effects plates, optically captured in 4K. Plates from the Abyss collection are compatible with any nonlinear editing system, but let's start by taking a look at Adobe After Effects, Adobe Premiere Pro, and Final Cut Pro. Let's dive in. See, dive, like what? Yeah. Alright everybody, here we are in After Effects, and I've pulled out this really beautiful plate, Waves Top Close-Up 03. I think is really wonderful and brooding and dark and really nice. I was going to show you some stuff with splashes and explosions, but I really like some of the abstract artistic options on the table with some of the stuff from the Abyss pack, so I thought we'd look at a little bit of title design. Before we can do anything with our title design, we're going to need a title, and I've come up with a very creative title for this. We're going to call it Abyss. You try doing these tutorials all day. Okay, so we're going to take our text and we're going to make it into a 3D layer, and you'll see why shortly. I'm also going to scale it up a little bit. I do quite like this font, and we're going to leave the anchor point at the bottom and just kind of put it roughly where we want it. Next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to go to Layer, New, Camera, and we're going to make sure we're creating a 2-node camera, and we're going to call it Camera 1. And under Presets, why don't we make it a 35mm lens. We can also keep depth of field enabled. Maybe we'll play around a little bit with that, and make the aperture 2.8, but we'll leave that all alone for now. Great, nothing changed. Why is that? It's a good question. Things are about to change. If I press the C button, you'll see that my cursor changes through a bunch of different camera options. This is orbit, that's move around, that's zoom in and out, but we want this one, which is kind of the everything tool, the orbit tool. I use this for orbiting, even though you can use this for orbiting. Anyway, if I click and drag, you'll see that the camera that we created rotates around our 3D text, but not around our background, because our background is 2D. If I were to make our background 3D, you'd see the camera rotates around both of them. Let's not do that yet. So I'm going to rotate our camera around the text that says Abyss, till that looks like that sort of incorrect perspective with the water. I also think we should have a slightly longer focal length, so I'm going to change that to maybe 50. And then using the zoom tool, I'm going to pull our camera out, and using the movement tool, I'm just going to center it on Abyss. Awesome. Now I'm going to duplicate our Abyss layer, drag the text below it, and we're going to call that Reflection. And because they're both 3D, I'm going to press R, and using the rotate tools, I can rotate that text around 180 degrees and give ourselves a reflection of the text Abyss. I'm just going to take a little bit of artistic license, drag it down, drag this up, and yeah, that's looking okay so far. So, what are we going to do? We are going to duplicate our waves layer, throw it on top of our reflection layer, and then each of these needs to be pre-comped. So, just so we can see what we're doing, I'm going to get rid of that text, and I'm going to get rid of this, and we just got these guys. So we have our Abyss text upside down, and we have a duplicate of our base waves layer. First thing I'm going to do is right click on our waves layer, click pre-compose, and we're going to call this waves displace, move all attributes into a new composition, and I'm going to click this little button, which is collapse transforms, and that lets us retain some information through the subcomping, which will come in handy later. Then I'm going to take our reflection layer, let's shy our waves, I'm going to right click on it, I'm going to go to pre-compose, and we're going to call this reflection pre-comp, and you'll notice it breaks. What I need to do is I need to make it into a 3D layer and enable collapse transforms. You'll see that when you collapse transformation, it carries through information from the pre-comp in a way that lets stuff still be accessed in the main comp. For instance, if in this I were to duplicate this layer and in 3D space rotate it, back in this comp with collapse transformations, those two 3D layers would be honored, Whereas if I didn't collapse transformations, it would rotate around one flattened version of the two. But let's hit Command Z a whole bunch of times and undo that because I don't need it. Excellent. But I'm going to keep collapse transforms enabled because it's how I like to work. So let's turn those layers back on. And we're going to apply an effect to our reflection. That effect is to be found under the Distort effects, and it's called Displacement Map. So I'm going to shy our waves displace, and back on our reflection layer, I'm going to select that shied waves displace layer as our displacement map layer, and immediately you'll see weird stuff happens to our text. I'm going to change the use for horizontal displace and the use for vertical displace to lightness because we're just using black and white footage, and then I'm going to crank up the maximum horizontal and the maximum vertical displace, and when I hit play, you'll see that we actually get an effect that almost looks like a reflection off the water. What's happening is our reflection text layer is using the light and dark values from the video footage that's pre-comped in waves displace to alter the horizontal and vertical displacement of this layer. You'll see we get different results whether we collapse transformations or not. I think we retain better scaling and perspective if we collapse transforms, which is why I turned it on in the first place. I'm also now going to take our reflection layer. I'm now going to go to our reflection layer and hue, lightness, saturation. And we're going to turn down the lightness a little bit just so that it's not quite as bright as the original text. And we're going to duplicate our original waves layer again. Drop it on top of our reflection layer. And under effects, we're going to look for an effect called threshold. We're going to throw CC threshold on our waves layer. And as you can see, threshold kind of reduces a layer down to just pure white and pure black. I'm then going to use that waves layer with the threshold on it as an inverse lumimat on our text, so it will only show through on lighter parts of our image, meaning that on the back sides of darker waves it will not show. That looks pretty cool to me. I'm now going to jump to our project window. Our project is poorly named just after the original stock footage. I'm going to pull it out. We're going to call this waves. We're going to call this Abyss title pre, and let's drag it down into its own new comp. Let's add some scale keyframes and some position keyframes, and over the duration of the shot, why don't we zoom in on it, move it down a little bit, and then let's grab our position. Let's go to my favorite tool, the Wiggler. And we're going to go for some low frequency, high magnitude camera movement. And when I RAM preview, you'll see it just adds a little bit of life to our shot. I think it looks pretty cool. Could always be cooler. New, adjustment layer, effects, color correction, levels. Crush that just a bit. Effects, noise, add noise. Let's go for monochromatic noise and effects, stylize, glow. Let's increase the radius, increase the threshold, and decrease the glow intensity a little bit. Layer, new, solid. Let's call this solid vignette. I'm going to mask out the center of the vignette, set it to subtract, F for feather, feather it out, T for opacity, drag down the opacity, and let's take a look. If that isn't a cool title in just a couple of minutes work, I don't know what is. Why don't we jump over to Adobe Premiere and see how we can use Abyss elements in that piece of software. Alright, and here we are in Adobe Premiere Pro, and let's have a look at how we can use some Abyss elements here to amp up a shot a little bit. So we have this shot of sort of a very serene looking house on the edge of a lake. Very nice, but I think we want to add something a little bit mysterious to it. So under Assets, I've picked Waves Top Bubbles 06, which is a very cool plate of some water bubbling. So we're going to grab that plate and throw it on top. As you can see, the footage is much bigger than our project, so I'm going to right-click on it and click Scale to Frame Size, and now it's much more usable. I'm going to scale it up a little bit, and let's just center that so we can do a little bit of work on it. Now, all of this water footage in the Abyss pack is really nicely lit. I think they shot it using sort of big white reflectors to get the waves out. But in this case, we're probably going to want to use a screen blending mode to get rid of the water, which isn't going to work so well on the lighter bit. So we're going to do a little bit of surgery here to make this clip work for us. I'm going to go under Effects, and I'm going to search for an effect called Crop, and then I'm going to throw Crop on there, and we're going to crop out the top. Maybe down almost to the middle, not to the middle, and then we're going to feather the edge a little bit. Then I'm going to select my clip, Command C, Command V. Let's double up our clip, throw it back on top, and then under Effects, I'm going to search for an effect called Vertical Flip. We're going to vertically flip our footage, and then we're going to manually line it up with our other footage. This one we can probably crop a little bit more and increase the feather so that it blends a little bit better. If you're not getting a naturalistic enough look from the crop, because the crop is sort of such a straight line, you could alternately delete your crop effect, and then you could actually draw a mask manually for the parts that you want to keep, which is really just kind of the dark edge of it. I'm going to zoom out a little bit because Premiere really starts freaking out when you start playing around the edge of your window. And I'm going to try and make this edge just a little irregular so that it doesn't look like I'm cutting two clips together. Okay, let's go back into where it fits, and then we can feather our mask and make a few adjustments so that we don't have any gaps in the mask. Okay, not too bad. Looks pretty natural to me. I'm going to select the two clips, click Nest, and we're going to look for an effect called Corner Pin. I'm going to apply my Corner Pin effect, and Corner Pin lets you grab the four corners of a clip and distort it, almost adding some perspective to it, which is really, really nice for this kind of effect. So I'm going to add some linear perspective to this guy. See if I can scale it down a tad. And under Motion, let's drag it into place. And under Blend Mode, let's select Screen. Very nice. Starting to see it, starting to look like it's a part of the scene. But to make this clip more visible, we're going to want to affect it a little bit. So we're going to jump over, we're going to type Lumetri. That always takes too long. What am I thinking? We're going to go to Video Effects, Color Correction, Lumetri Color, and we're going to drag Lumetri Color onto our nested sequence. And all we need to do is play with some curves. We want to drag the darks down, and we want to drag the lights up, and that'll just make our screen blending mode more effective. And if I hit play, as you can see, something terrifying is bubbling under the water, going to make staying at this cottage a little scary. Alright, so that's how we can use some Abyss clips in Adobe Premiere. Why don't we jump over to Final Cut Pro and see how we can do something similar over there. Alright everybody, and here we are in Final Cut Pro, and we're going to take a real quick look at how to use some Abyss elements in this piece of software. Here we have some footage of a very serene mountain. It's also got some audio on it, which doesn't work for us, so let me turn that off. Some footage of a very serene mountain. I think this is Mount Fuji, although I could be wrong. It looks like it's maybe a little time-lapse based on the blur quality in the water, although the larger waves lead me to think that may not be the case. Suffice to say, I'm not super duper happy with the way the waves are in this, so I think I'm going to use something from Abyss just to change the quality of the water. I'm going to grab Waves Top 11, and let's drop it over our footage and shorten our footage to match. And as you can see, Waves 11 has this awesome kind of choppy effect, looks very natural and windblown. I like it. So we're going to jump up to compositing modes, and we're going to switch that to screen. And as you can see, that sort of doesn't really work because our footage is the wrong size. You know, I mean, I guess we could just drag that down there so it was just over the water, but I can't say that's a really particularly convincing effect, and if you submitted that for me on a job, I would fire you. So what we're going to want to do is actually we're going to want to look at an effect that we haven't talked about before here. We're going to right click and we're going to hit Distort. What Distort does is it actually lets you grab individual corners of the footage and drag it around just like a corner pin for sort of a pseudo 3D effect. We'll do that in a second. The first thing I want to do is actually zoom out a little bit so I can see past the edges of where we're working, maybe around 25%. And then I'm going to grab a corner and let's drag it down to the waterline. And let's grab another corner and we'll drag it down to the waterline. Make sure that's nice and straight. But for some added perspective, we're going to grab the two bottom corners, drag them out a little bit. Make sure we're right at the waterline there. And we can zoom back in so we can see what we're doing. And yeah, right about there. Awesome, let's take a quick look. That definitely looks better, although that water seems to be traveling pretty quickly. So another neat thing we can do here is we can twirl down our time options. I should be able to set our speed to, let's say, 50%, and then slide down to video quality and select optical flow. And optical flow will do its best to interpret between frames, but we can't really get a look at how it feels until it's done analyzing the optical flow. While that's working, I'm going to jump over to color, and we're going to scroll down and we're going to grab a tint. And it actually already kind of defaulted to just about the right color, but I'm just going to sample one of the darker parts of the sky and darken it a bit. And actually, I kind of liked how it looked a little bit more purple. Pretty funky. I'm also going to jump up to the color correction tab, and under exposure, probably going to want to turn it down a bit so we're kind of, see, if I turn it all the way down, the screen mode totally knocks it out. I don't want that. If I turn it up too high, it looks wrong. So we're just going to play with the shadows and the highlights. Alright, and once that's done analyzing for optical flow, you can see we get nice wave motion out of it, and it just changes the look of our footage a little bit in a way that I like. Alright everybody, I hope you enjoyed this quick look at the Abyss collection. For more great stock footage visual effects plates and tutorials like this one, be sure to visit RocketStock.com. I'm Matthew Naiman, and remember, when you stare into the Abyss stares back. Or something. So long.